Hello and welcome to this session, and in this session we shall continue our understanding of the concept of pronouns. Well, you already know that all of these happen to be the various types of pronouns, and in this session our focus shall be on the first one, that is the subject pronoun. So what really do we mean by a subject pronoun and how is it really used in the framing of proper English sentences? Let me explain. Even before I dive deep and explain to you the concept of subject pronouns, have a look at these sentences. Sarah went to the store. Sarah bought some groceries. Sarah then went home. Well, in all of these sentences, I'm sure you are able to understand that Sarah happens to be the subject. After all, it is Sarah who is performing the action in all of these sentences, and hence, in all of the sentences, Sarah is the one who happens to be the subject of the sentence. But then, I'm sure you can easily notice that all of these sentences lack a natural flow and is definitely an inefficient way of framing sentences in English. So, what is it that we have to do to avoid the repetition of the subject Sarah? Well, all that I will have to do is to take the same three sentences, and obviously in the first sentence I shall retain Sarah to be the subject, but then in the second sentence I shall replace Sarah with a subject pronoun she. Yes, and then in the third sentence as well I shall replace Sarah with the subject pronoun she. And now the sentences that Sarah went to the store, she bought some groceries, she then went home, obviously happens to be such a sentence where the conversation flow is more natural and efficient. It definitely reduces the redundancy in the sentences and keeps the listener's attention on the sequence of events rather than on the name Sarah. All said and done, what I want you to understand here is that the word she, which is replacing the subject Sarah in the two sentences, happen to be the subject pronouns. And the subject pronoun, I'm sure through this example you have been able to understand, helps in avoiding repetition. The repetition that was there in the previous three sentences made the sentences unnatural and inefficient. But then the moment I replace the subject Sarah with the equivalent subject pronoun, that obviously the sentences have become more natural and efficient, and I'm sure that through this example you have been able to understand as to what really is the role played by a subject pronoun. That way, the formal definition of the subject pronoun happens to be this, that a subject pronoun is such a pronoun that shall replace the subject of the sentence. Well, you know that in the previous example, the subject of the sentence happened to be Sarah, and she is the word that has replaced Sarah in the remaining two sentences and hence is categorized as the subject pronoun, because after all it is replacing the subject of the sentence. Well, not just that, you should also understand that the subject pronoun is the one that actually performs the action in the sentence. Well, that way, again, if you would look back at the example, you can notice that it is Sarah indeed who is performing the action of going to the store, and it is Sarah but then represented through the subject pronoun she who is performing the action of purchasing the groceries, and it is Sarah who is being represented by the subject pronoun she who is also performing the action of going back home. So all said and done, what I want you to understand is that the subject pronouns happen to be such pronouns that replace the subject of the sentence, and that it is the subject pronoun that performs the action in the sentence. All said and done, subject pronouns definitely help in avoiding repetition and makes the sentence a lot smoother and more coherent. Well, that way, all of these words in English vocabulary are categorized as subject pronouns. So, I'm sure that you have now been able to understand that the subject pronouns indeed help in avoiding repetition. But then, not just that, the subject pronouns also help in promoting clarity and simplicity in the sentence, and also it shall enable the emphasis to be on the action of the subject rather than on the subject itself. Anyway, what do these 2 points mean? Let me explain. Speaking about the aspect of promoting clarity and simplicity, have a look at these two sentences. The president of the company announced a new initiative. The president of the company emphasized its importance. Well, no doubt, both of these sentences happen to be valid English sentences, but then I'm sure you realize that the sentences are not straightforward and concise. What I mean to say is that the phrase the president of the company happens to be the subject in both of the sentences, but then the repetition of the phrase in the second sentence is making the sentence more complicated. Well, if I'll really have to rectify this and make it more simple, all that I'll have to do is to replace the president of the company in the second sentence with an equivalent subject pronoun he. And now, if you would look at the two sentences, that the president of the company announced a new initiative, he emphasized its importance, definitely makes the sentences more straightforward and concise, and it definitely eliminates the need to repeat the phrase the president of the company. So all said and done, in this example, I'm sure you realize that the removal of the long phrase and replacing it with an equivalent subject pronoun he has definitely enhanced the clarity and the simplicity of the sentence. Hope I'm clear with this example. Let me give you one more example to clarify this for you. Have a look at these two sentences. The students in the biology class performed an experiment. The students in the biology class recorded their results. Well, again, I'm sure you understand that both of these sentences happen to be valid English sentences, just that they are not concise and simple. The reason for them not being concise and simple is because in the second sentence, there is a repetition of the phrase the students in the biology class. And if I'll really have to make it more simple and concise, all that I really have to do is to replace this phrase with an equivalent subject pronoun. And here, since I am referring to a group of students, that I cannot be making use of the subject pronoun he or she here. Rather, I will be making use of the subject pronoun they. And now, if you would notice the two sentences, that the students in the biology class performed an experiment, they recorded their results, definitely simplifies the sentences, making them clearer and easier to understand. So all said and done, I'm sure now you are able to understand that the subject pronouns not only enable avoiding repetition, they also bring about more clarity and simplicity to the sentences. But then, what is this third point about emphasizing the focus on the action? Let me explain. Have a look at these sentences. The dog fetched the ball. The dog then dropped it on the ground. Well, these two sentences are organized in such a manner that the focus in both the sentences is on the dog rather than on the action of fetching and dropping the ball. What I mean to say is that just in case I happen to replace the dog in the second sentence with a subject pronoun it, then the sentences that the dog fetched the ball, it then dropped it on the ground makes the sentence more clear and concise. Moreover, the sentences in the second case are organized in a manner where the focus is not on the dog, rather it is on the action of fetching and dropping the ball on the ground. In other words, what I would wish to say is that the subject pronouns also enables us to keep the focus on the action rather than who actually is doing it. Anyway, let me give you one more example to substantiate this. Have a look at these sentences. The children played in the park. The children laughed and ran around. Well, again here you can notice that the sentences have been framed in such a manner that the focus is on the children rather than the action of they playing and laughing around in the park. In other words, what I mean to say is that just in case I happen to replace the children in the second sentence with the subject pronoun they, then the sentences that the children played in the park, they laughed and ran around actually shifts the focus from the children to the action of laughing and running, and this definitely is a better way of framing sentences. So all said and done, through these examples, I am sure you have been able to understand even this third point, that the subject pronouns actually helps to emphasize the focus on the action rather than who actually is performing the action. So I'm sure in this session you have been able to understand the concept of subject pronouns, but then you know that there are a lot of other types of pronouns as well that you need to master, and all that you really need to do, if you have to master all of the different types of pronouns and then frame meaningful and impressive sentences in English, then you need to be watching my next session. Thanks for watching this session. Hope it was informative. Let's meet again in my next session.